Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Lexi and Lace podcast. I'm Lexi, and today, this episode is going to be very legal focused. So, listener discretion is advised. If it's something you're not really interested in, I suggest you come back next week. That's what I suggest. Yeah. If the law's not really your thing, and when I mean law focused, I mean this is going to be a little bit of a different episode. We're not going to talk about fashion. We're not going to talk about AI. Because some things are happening in the legal system, which, you just need to talk about this. And a lot of it is going to have to do with how the UK government is choosing to make some reforms to the legal system, which is fine, The English legal system, some reforms have to be made, it's an old system. It's been around for hundreds of years. And we mean hundreds, of years. Since the 1600s, 1400s, 1200, like a long time. So, yeah, it's going to be one of those episodes where it's going to be a little bit of history, but a lot of it is going to be legal jargon. So if you're interested, please stay and we can talk about how the UK is changing its jury system. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the judicial review of Palestine Action, which surprisingly, it all ties in together. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the P word this week. Crazy. But I think the main thing that the episode is about this week is very much about specific changes that are being made to the UK legal system and how that will affect, or how that is affecting certain cases that we are seeing now, if that makes sense, or how it will affect future cases, and how if you've been sort of following and keeping up with, let's say, UK public law, you will see how maybe this was something that has been in the making or has been in the works for a few years. So, public law was never my favorite subject when I was in first year. It was interesting, don't get me wrong, in its own way, but it was not my favorite. But it was a necessary subject, and it really helped me to decipher things that I'm going to be talking about today. So yeah, let's really get into it. Let's get into it. All right. See you in the next segment. Alrighty, let's get into it. So the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, who, by the way, wasn't he foreign minister for a while? Then he was deputy prime minister. Like, did my man just get demoted? Because apparently, the Justice Secretary is like the most underfunded, like, secretary out there. Like, that is the most underfunded ministry out there. So anywho, like, David Lammy, did you get demoted? Like, what's really going on? Trying to get your money up, like, like, please tell us what's going on. Anywho, so he's wishing to reform jury trials in the UK, right? So, David Lammy is proposing judge-only trials for either way cases with a sentence of 3 years or less in the Crown Court, right? So, what is an either way case? Basically, an either way case is a case that can be tried in the Crown or Magistrates' courts. And magistrates usually choose based on different factors, such as like the severity of the case or like the defendant's criminal history, whether it's something that should, that they can try, because the Magistrates' court's like the first level, right? Whether it's something that they can try there or they can just send it up to the Crown Court, right? And then there's obviously like Court of Appeal, then there's a Supreme Court and stuff. So then, In an either way case, the defendant can also decide if they want a Crown Court trial or not. Because within the magistrates' courts, there's no jury. In the Crown Court, there is a jury, right? So the proposal is to increase the cases that a magistrate's court could judge to ones with a sentence of 18 months or less. So currently in the magistrates' courts, the magistrate can only give up a sentence of up to 12 months, but that's going to be increased to 18 months or 2 years based on what I was reading, right? So Lamy is arguing that by essentially scrapping jury trials for, I would say, a lot of criminal offenses, this will allow for a more speedy trial. So he's arguing in favor of balance for the victims due to the backlog that has piled up because of COVID, all right? So, to just explain this, the current situation is that there'll be guaranteed jury trials for all indictable offenses. So these are the most serious offenses, which currently must be heard by a jury. So those include, advisory, discretion. I'm about to use some words that people might find a little bit triggering. So trigger warning, my guys. So those offenses include rape, murder, manslaughter, aggravated burglary, blackmail, people trafficking, GBH, which is grievous bodily harm, and most serious drug offenses. And currently, also like stuff like fraud or financial cases. So what Lamy is proposing is that, no, we're going to take only the most heinous crimes, which include rape, murder, and manslaughter, or anything that can be defined as in the public interest will undergo a jury trial. But when it comes to public interest, that can really depend. But I remember in law school, this is very like public law heavy, of course, but I remember in law school, even when it comes to like judgments, judges have to take into account whether this judgment within in and of itself will be for the public, is going to be made in the public interest, right? So there's that. So currently, Lamy is proposing that these 3 crimes plus others can go to trial, but everything else will essentially can be decided in the magistrate's court, right? And in that situation, the defendant can also decide if it's an either way offense, meaning 3 years or less in prison, right? I hope that all makes sense. So, why is this happening? Why is this happening? It is happening because currently there's a court backlog of 78,000 and it's soon to reach 100,000. So in their heads, what's currently happening is that 90% of all cases are tried by the magistrates anyways, and only 3% of those go to actual trial. So Lamy's claim is that by introducing these swift courts, you'll save about 20% of trial time because there won't be a jury there. So essentially, you're going to be saving 20% of 3%. I'm not a mathematician. At the end of the day, I have a law degree. Lawyers and maths, we don't go together. But what I'm hearing is that it's not going to make much of a difference. Because what do you mean 20% of 3%? And also, wouldn't that just be putting more pressure on magistrates' courts? Because, you see, these are the things that don't make sense. Because, all right, you're removing all of these different things. You're removing GBH, you're removing serious drug offenses, you're removing all these different things which might not require juries, but it's still like, GBH is pretty intense. What do you mean you want a magistrate's court to judge that and not and you don't want the defendant to be judged according to a panel of their peers? You know what I mean? So that's the plan. That is currently the plan. One thing I will say is that when it comes to sort of complex fraud and financial cases, I think it makes sense there. I think your average layperson, your average jury member will not know technical, financial, accounting, auditing, wara. So for them to be able to make a decision, kind of crazy. So I think that's where I'm like, yes, this makes sense. In other situations, I'm like, I still think that's a pretty heinous offense. Like GBH? No. But that's just my personal opinion. But it hasn't happened yet. This is just all It hasn't even started the process yet. So we're not even in the white paper stages yet. This is all just like an idea. But he did bring it to Parliament and stuff. So, for some history and for some context, the Magna Carta, which, by the way, it was signed in Runnymede, which is like near Royal Holloway. So, like, they always talk about that. Like, yeah, like, just go down the road and stuff. Anywho, Magna Carta signed in 1215, which laid the foundations for parliamentary power. It stated that no free man could be punished except by the lawful judgment of his peers or the law of the land. Right? Then, by the end of the English Civil War, around 1660, the independence of juries had become a key safeguard against arbitrary rule. So the Bushell's case of 1670 cemented this by ruling that jurors could not be punished for their verdicts, establishing the principle of jury autonomy. So we have the idea that juries should exist and people should be judged according to a panel of their peers, right? 1215. Then English Civil War happens and juries were able to gain jury autonomy and therefore they could not be persecuted or punished due to their verdicts. Then in the English Bill of Rights in 1689, further entrenched the rights of defendants to trial by jury, particularly in criminal matters, as a safeguard against interference or abuses by the king. Essentially, juries were created so that the king was not the only person that could make decisions, and it also allowed for people to be, I guess, judged by those who are around them every day. Because at the end of the day, a jury is about your peers, your community around you, judging you based off of their life experiences, not someone who's a king who's just up there, who doesn't really have a connection to the general people, right? So juries became a symbol of both community participation and protection from state overreach. That is the whole point of a jury. This is like literally entrenched within the English legal system. And what ended up happening is that now the common law, which is based off of having a jury, civil law doesn't have juries. So if you're a civil law country, you don't have a jury. It's all judges. It's the judge who basically, the way that I learned it was that the judge is the one who does the investigation, and so they be the ones asking questions and stuff, right? So trial by jury is literally the whole point of the English legal system. How by reforming the system is not just throwing all of that to the dogs is beyond me. Like, at this point, you're throwing it to the dogs. Like, I don't understand what the point is, because even when British colonialism did happen, they sort of carried the system around the world. So till this day, the US has common law, Canada, where else? India. Other places did reform themselves in certain ways. So, for example, Kenya has a mixture, but it's still common law. South Africa has a mixture, still common law in some cases. Singapore uses some common law, even though they reformed their system a little bit. Even other countries are also adopting common law things within the, Hong Kong uses some common law, but even though they reformed it also, so it's like, that is just gonna set, I don't know if that's I can't say it's, I can't say what the effect of that will be and whether or not that will be sort of like, what is the word I'm looking for? Just, the word is not stumbling block, but I just don't understand what that will then lead to. So then, this is why I wanted to look into this specifically, because I needed to further investigate why this is happening specifically now and specifically at this time. Because if you want to stop the backlog that has built up over COVID and a backlog that was even there before COVID, based off of 3%, you then have to look at a system and be like, okay, what is the actual problem here? Is it the way we are doing things, or is there something else that we can do? So while I was reading, a lot of the solutions that came up is that you just have to fund the system properly. What was I saying at the beginning of this is that the Justice Department or the Justice Secretary or the Ministry of Justice is the most underfunded, least funded, right? So what could they do instead? These are some of the suggestions that came up. Fixing the heating and air conditioning units in order for there to be more sitting days. How can you sit in somewhere if it's bloody freezing? How can you sit in somewhere if it's hot as shit? Like, you're not going to. Build new courts and prisons as they're already overflowing. There's a prison overflow in the UK, happening in the UK right now, and they've been talking about this. So it's like, sorry, you're talking about extending sentences for people from 12 months to 18 months, but you don't even know where you're going to put these people. How does that make sense? Then you also have to make it accessible for people to be in those professions in the first place. So you have to train more barristers and judges, as well as increasing legal aid funding. Because you know what ends up happening is that, okay, you're a defendant, but you don't have money to defend yourself. So you can't get a barrister. You can't get a barrister to defend you in the first place. Or you're going to be in pretrial detention for 6 months or to a year in some cases, just rotting away because guess what? You don't have anyone to defend you, or there's just such a backlog because guess what? There's no barristers or judges to oversee the cases in the first place. I knew this guy, or I was introduced to this guy, and he's like, no, this guy has like a stellar resume, by the way. And he was explaining to me how he'd been wanting to do the bar for years and years. So he did his LLB, then he went to go do an LLM, then he started working because he was saving money, all of this to do the bar. So it took him, so all in all, if you're in the UK and you're on student finance, the degree is covered, but obviously you're in debt. Then for you to do a master's, only half of it is paid for by the government, essentially, based on, I guess, also how much student finance you technically have left, right? So then a master's degree is about 20 to 30K, right? So then you've already spent 9 to 10K for the past 3 years, so that's 30K, plus another 20K, which they might only cover about 10 to 12K. So then you have to figure out where to get the rest, whether it's either 8K or more. So then that's about 50K, 50 to 60K that you're now in debt of. And then on top of that, you might want to go do a bar course. And the bar course is also in itself another 20K. So for you to be able to even become a barrister, or to even, I don't know about the judge process, but to even become a judge in the first place, or to become a barrister in the first place, look at how much money you're going to be spending or how much debt you're going to be putting yourself into in order to have the profession and do the job that you want to do. You see, and I tell people this all the time, nothing is a coincidence, everything is by design, because now you're telling me 20% of 3%, but for me to even become a barrister, in order to defend someone in the first place, I have to go 70 plus in debt to be able to get into the profession in the first place. Because, and this is one of the many criticisms of having a judge-only trial. How it works is that, for example, magistrates live in the community, and just like the juries, I'm not going to say that they're your peers, but they might see you every day. Judges, on the other hand, are described as living in their own private islands. A lot of judges are privately educated, white in the UK. So, and they're just not part of the social class. So it's like, how are you asking this person to judge me based on my specific circumstances when you don't even know what my day-to-day life is like? You know, that's the main problem. So MP Diane Abbott, shout out her, she was saying that judge-only trials would result in greater numbers of miscarriage of justice because many judges come from the same class and may have unconscious biases. Because guess what? They're all private educated, they're all part of the same boys club, and they're all white. So it's like, how do you expect this person to judge me based on my circumstances as I'm going to take myself, a Black woman immigrant? Do you know what I mean? And then another criticism is that the way that it works in the UK, it's the Lord Chancellor, in this case, David Lammy, who gets to appoint judges in the first place. So if, let's say, for example, Labour's now obviously in power, but let's say Reform wins, and then Reform will also have their own judges, because how it works is that you have to apply, it's like a competition to become a judge, and then your name gets sent to the Lord Chancellor, and then they choose who it is. So you now have a Reform Lord Chancellor, reform is going to put reform people. Labor is going to put labor people. Right? So that also is going to have another like cascading effect of how things are going to end up in the future and how things might end up being and what sort of outcomes you're going to have in the justice system, right? And then another big criticism is that it could create new problems such as an increase of appeals or challenges on grounds of judicial bias, or basically just reduced public confidence in the outcome of trials, because guess what? I'm not being judged according to a panel of my peers, but according to one person who doesn't even know my day-to-day life, because guess what? Judges live in their own private islands. Do we see where the issue is? Do we see where the issue is, ladies and gentlemen? They, them, everybody in between. Do we see the issue? So instead of funding and having the availability and the most amount of resources in order to have a speedy trial, in order for there to be swift and, proper carriages of justice, no, we are now deciding that, what we can do? Let's just dump all of these people to the magistrates' courts, and then only the very serious ones will go to trial. And it's like, sure, but that doesn't really solve the problem, because guess what? Like, there still won't be enough people. The prisons are still overflowing. There will never be enough barristers and judges. That's basically what's now happening. But there have been talks of a potential sunset clause. So what does that mean? That means that it's more of a temporary reform rather than a permanent change. And then once the backlog has basically not logged anymore. I don't know what the word is, but basically once there's no longer a backlog and the system is functioning again, you can then go back to the old system. But the fear of that is that, this is Parliament. Who the hell wants to do that? Essentially, who would want to go back to the old system? Because I'll get into it more in our next segment, but all I can say is that that's not something that's desirable. And this is what I mean by everything is by design. Nothing is a coincidence. Because let's say you do put in a sunset clause. Who's going to go back in 5 years to change it back? Who's going to go do that? Who's even thinking about that? In 5 years, we'll have other issues to think about. And let's say it is faster. Who's going to then want to go back and be like, oh yeah, let's just go back to the old system? They're going to be like, well, no, the swift courts are actually being swift, so why would we go back? Things are working fine. And then, look where you are now. Look where you are now. Think about it. Next segment. And we are back. Remember when I said that everything is by design and there's no coincidences? One thing that you also have to keep in mind, which was mentioned by Sarah Russell, a Labour MP, was that jury trials are also going to be scrapped for cases involving the right to protest. So the way that I saw this was as a continuation of the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022, which allows police to impose conditions on static and one-person protests based on noise levels that cause serious disruption or public nuisance. And it also increased the maximum penalty for willfully obstructing a highway, which is fully enforced on or before the 27th of November 2025. What is the date today? 3rd of who? December 2025. When I say that things are by design, I sound like a conspiracy theorist. I actually sound like nothing is by coincidence, because how is it that this is coming specifically at the time when they want to restrict? Like, it seems like the government is trying to restrict protests, and it's like, why is this happening right at this time? What is happening? Why is this all happening? Like, why is this all converging all at the same time? Like, what is really going on? And then when we say that it wants to scrap like right to protest, one principle that they want to scrap that a lot of judges don't like, is jury equity. So this is a concept from 1670, around the same time that, we got jury autonomy and things like that. It's all around that same time. So what happened is that juries have the right, or have in the past had the right to exercise the right to acquit people based on their conscience, right? So despite there being no question of their having carried out the actions for which they were tried, but a number of cases in which this will be possible will be reduced under the changes. So what that basically means is that, let's say, it's like you've said that you're guilty. We can see that you've done it. The jury can be like, you know what? It seems like you did this for the greater good. We're going to acquit you anyways, because it seems that, yes, you've done a crime, but your intention wasn't to do a crime. It was for the greater good. So I guess it goes back to this thing of like civil disobedience and all of those, like all of that jazz, essentially. So the way that jury equity has been used, it's been used to acquit people, like, for example, like Asian youth groups who fought against racism. Extinction Rebellion activists were also acquitted under this. So like those are the climate activists, as well as anti-war protesters, or those who've been sort of like historically like cleared under jury equity. And the way jury equity works is that, even let's say that the judge can be like, no, this person is guilty, the defendant should be found guilty. The jury can be like, no, but they did it for a good reason. Like, consciously speaking or morally speaking, we see the point of what they're doing, so we're gonna acquit them anyway. And this is when I get to the point that I've been trying to make. In the past, Palestine action activists have also been acquitted using this principle of jury equity. Why don't judges like this? Because it undermines their power. That's essentially it. But not only in these specific cases of, jury equity or like the right to protest, does that undermine the judge's power? It also undermines, I guess, the government's power, because they don't want you to do certain things. So when it comes to Palestine Action and their prescription, they were prescribed because a group of their activists, in, you could say, relation to the genocide in Gaza, they broke into a British Air Force base in the south of England, and they allegedly caused an estimated damage of like £7 million to two aircrafts who were supplying weapons to Israel, right? So, and they also did other stuff, like they broke into like Elbit Systems, which is an Israeli like tech company who does a lot of like military like surveillance and military stuff. So they've done a few things. They've done a few things. We can't say that they haven't done it. They have done a few things, and it just makes me laugh because I'm like, guys, civil disobedience taken to a whole other level. Anywho, so that's what they've done, right? So the government was like, prescription, you guys are now a terrorist group. So then what has been happening in relation to that? You've had a lot of people who've gone out protesting with certain signs and banners, and they've been charged in the Terrorism Act, right? And that carries a sentence of up to 12 years. So now what's currently going on is that there's a judicial review of the prescription, because essentially a judicial review is sort of like, it's like an appeal process to what the government has done. Let's say that. It's like you're taking the government to court, but you're appealing what they've essentially done to you, right? So there's a judicial review of their decision to prescribe Palestine Action, and the way that this judicial review has gone has also been very shaky. That's why I wanted to make this specific episode, because there have been a lot of things happening in the UK justice system, legal system, which are extremely outside of the norm, and this is why I say everything is by design. So the judgment hasn't come out yet. So I'm going to have like two reactions to this. My first reaction is that if they get unprescribed, that's really good because then we'll know, okay, this is based off of, there still being a right to protest, even though the government has been eating around the governments, because even the 2022 Act was enforced by the Conservatives. So it's like they've sort of slowly been eating around the right to protest in the UK. And when I was there, I would this act came out and I was like, guys, isn't this crazy? And like no one was listening to me, and I was like, guys, you can't really protest, right? Like, you be making a little bit of noise, they'd be like, you know what, you get out of here. And it's like, how? So they've been like slowly eating around it, and it's like you can see it happening. This is why I'm like, everything is happening all at the same time. So yeah, their judicial review has been this week, and I think it's done. I think they ended, their last arguments were yesterday, 2nd of December. So it's been a fiasco essentially, because there was one judge overseeing the case, but then last minute they done changed the judge. It's now someone else who is more affiliated, who's more affiliated with the government, or someone who's like more inclined to take the government side. And then on top of that, what the government has done is they've said that they want to give secret evidence to the judge which has justified the prescription. And when the government enforces this, it basically doesn't allow the defendant to know what the evidence is. So the defendant can't see the evidence. What they do instead, so it's like the defendant and the defendant's lawyer cannot see the evidence. So it's like, okay, the government is giving secret evidence, leave the room. So yeah, like the Palestine Action people had to leave the room, and then a special advocate, what do they call it? An impartial special advocate had to come in and like oversee what that evidence is. And obviously that happened. But the special advocate is also not allowed to tell the defendant what the evidence was. So the problem now is that if the prescription stands, Palestine Action they will never know what it is that the government has said in order to justify the continuation of the prescription, right? That's essentially it, right? So then, this is why I'm like, I have two reactions. So it's like, great if, despite all of the different machinations in the background, things that were happening, that they get unprescribed, because it's like, cool, there's still a level of, let me not say democracy, there's still a level of like, procedure that is in place that people want to respect the right to protest. Let's say that. But if it doesn't happen, then that's when I can say nothing is a coincidence. Everything is by design, because everything that is happening now, all at the same time, the 2022 Act coming being enforced recently, judicial review happening right at this time, Lami talking about let's get rid of the juries and basically stopping jury equity as one of the clauses that they want to put in there. Everything is happening all at the same time, that it's like, guys, they might be wanting to take away your right to protest. And why are they wanting to do that? Well, that one you can infer for yourself. I ain't gonna say it, but we might all be thinking it. But on a serious note, despite what the reasoning is, I think it just causes, it's really just a domino effect of different things. And you can see it all happening all around the same time. And that's what I mean. It's like you have to start questioning things that are happening around you, because what you thought you had yesterday, you might not have today. And what you think you have today, you don't have tomorrow. So this is something that really, I think it shook me a little bit, because I was like, wait a minute. What do you mean, jury trials? I'm very selective about the news that I watch. So I consume news in a very specific way, and I consume very specific news and news mediums and news channels. So when I saw this, I said, pause, wait a damn minute. And then I'm looking at everything that's been happening over the last week, and I'm like, wait a minute. The judicial reviews also this week. Mr. Lamy is saying this week. Then I had to go search up certain things, and I'm like, oh, this is coming into force like, nah, bro. It's just, as you say, Mozambique, samaning saying, like, everything is happening, like, so at the same, like, everything is happening all at the same time, and it's like, this is literally by design. They're doing this for a specific reason. This is a long time coming. This is what I mean by, it's like, they've been eating around this thing for a minute. And it makes you wonder, why is that? What is the problem? What don't they want? What, like, again, I sound like conspiracy, but it's like, what is it that they're wanting to achieve by doing this? If by doing this the government wants more power, then they're definitely going to achieve it, because it's like, you're gonna be giving not only the government more power, but more government entities power, because now it's like, you've given the police more power when it comes to protesting, and now you're gonna be giving judges more power. And it's like, it seems like it's just all like an elite class thing, where it's like, they definitely want to stay on top, and they have to find a way to stay on top as much as possible by doing these different things. Now, is it going to have a cascading effect on other common law, countries? They might, because for now, the US is all jury trials. That's why there's so many, that's why they're like so, they really like negotiations, and they really like, they made a deal, or they cut a deal with the prosecutors, because people don't want to go to trial. People don't want to go to trial. People don't necessarily want to be judged by a group of their peers, like a panel of their peers. Not necessarily. When they know that there's a chance that they might pick certain jurors, or this or that, or da-da-da. Everything's all over the place. But I think, especially in this case, or in this circumstance where they want to scrap jury trials for a lot of serious offenses, in my opinion, you're throwing the systems to the dogs, because now it's a domino effect. Like, what's next? Like, what's really going on? And it's like, it's not the common law if it's not based upon this principle that you're going to be judged according to a panel of your peers. So I really don't understand what the whole purpose of this is. And this is why I'm like, this is all by design. There's something that they want to do. There's something that people want to achieve by doing this. And I know that there's organizations like Defend Your Juries, which are definitely going to be on top of this to try and, just like see how it works. But it's like, I personally think that they just want to restrict people's right to protest, personally. And that's why things are being done in this specific way. It's not about, we want to ease the backlog. No, there's a specific reason this is happening. And what's funny is that when I was talking to my mom about like doing this, she was like, don't criticize the government. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about the law. And I stand on it. I think as someone who studied in the common law and studied like common law systems and studied all of that, for me, it doesn't make sense. Because as soon as it's like you're getting rid of one of the most fundamental principles of your legal system. So what is going to be left of it? And yes, things have to be reformed, and things have to change, and things have to be made better. But I don't think this is the better that people really need. I think that's what it is. I don't think this is the better that we need. Let's wrap this up. Next segment. I guess I just want to give some concluding remarks to certain things. I think this is this is an episode where I'm very passionate about what's going on, but it's also something that's very saddening at the same time, because you're sort of seeing something, you're like, this doesn't sit well with me as a person, So I think, and what I was reading is that this might cause a chilling effect to protesting in general, especially protesting about Palestine. I think that's what it is. And, like I was previously saying, I don't know if this is the sort of reform that is needed from the system. I think, and I will always advocate for this, is you have to fund things properly. If things are not properly funded, you have to think about, the first thing you shouldn't be thinking about is, how can we reform? It's like they're functioning on pennies, and now they want to stretch those pennies even further to a place where I don't even think the pennies will be stripped. Like, they're just trying to spread everything and everybody so thin that it won't even make sense anymore. Because I think what's going to happen now is that there's going to be more appeals, or you're going to have magistrate judges fatigue and all mental health, judges are overwhelmed, and it's like, no, you should have just funded the system more. You should have just funded the system more in order for things to be able to function properly. Because when I first started researching this, if the first thing I'm seeing is that the Ministry of Justice is one of the most underfunded ministries, then we already have a problem. Like, we have already found the issue here, in my opinion, in my book, and from my personal experience and my analysis and my legal analysis of things, we have already found the issue. So that's why I'm like, everything seems so by design. Everything seems so calculated. Nothing is sitting right. And you see, I'm not going to predict anything. I'm no Gary Stevenson. Shout out him. But I'm not going to sit here and predict what's going to happen. All I know is that if there is a better viable solution, they should probably go with that first. But, they want to cut costs. Oh, we don't have money. Okay. But I don't know if this is the solution that they need. I truly don't know if this is the solution that they need. I think, no, this ain't it. That's all I can say. 20% of 3%. Guys, that sounds ridiculous. That's why I'm like, that's not the real reason. I don't know what the real reason is. I can't infer. I can't predict. I can't even sit here and be like, oh, I think it's this. I don't know what it is. But all I know is that this is not the proper solution. This is a chilling effect. This is going to deter people from wanting to protest. Not only that, this is also not going to have the desired effect that you want. I think that's what it is. It's not going to have the desired effect. And from a legal standpoint, from a common law standpoint, you're throwing the system to the dogs. The system's to the dogs. I don't like it. I think it's like the whole principle of the common law is really, I don't think people understand how important the jury system is to the common law and like the historical, like, just like, like the historical context to it. Even though I can explain it, I don't think people understand how important it is to that. So all of this happening all at the same time, things are converging, things are all happening one after the other. The system's to the dogs. And I don't like to see it. That's all I can say. But yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening to this Lex and Lace podcast. Next week, I'll have something way more lighthearted, I promise. This has been very serious. So if you're interested in this, please, sometimes I might do something different. And this is just one of those weeks I decided to do something different. So all I can say is really thank you for the support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all of the feedback as well. I be getting a lot of feedback nowadays. And people are like, oh, we love this. Or, oh, don't do this differently. And I really be taking it on and just like, trying to improve my podcast as the days go by. I will also try to upload my podcast onto more platforms so that I can reach more of you, my good friends, family, and acquaintances, or my dear listener. So that's something I'll definitely want to do. So look out for that, and definitely like, comment, subscribe, follow, all the beautiful things. And thank you for listening to the Lex and Lace podcast. I will see you next week. Bye bye.